Random House Audio presents A Blaze of Glory, a novel of the Battle of Shiloh by Jeff Shaara. Read for you by Paul Michael. The horrible sights that I have witnessed on this field I can never describe. No blaze of glory that flashes around the magnificent triumphs of war can ever atone for the unwritten and unutterable horrors of the scene of carnage. Brigadier General James A. Garfield, U.S. Army of the Ohio, 20th President of the United States. To the Reader. This is the first of a trilogy that explores the mostly overlooked stories of the Civil War that take place west of the Appalachian Mountains, what is usually referred to as the War in the West. This trilogy will focus on three pivotal events: the Battle of Shiloh, the Siege of Vicksburg, and the final chapter of the war in Georgia and the Carolinas. If you have read any of my books, you know that these stories are driven not by events, but by characters. For me, the points of view of the characters in this story are more appealing than the blow-by-blow facts and figures that are the necessary products of history textbooks. For that reason, I try to find those specific characters who pull me into the story, whose actions affect the history of the event, and whose own points of view will, I hope, bring that story to you in a way you find more intriguing and more personal than what you might have read in high school. The primary voices in this book include historical figures unique to this story, and others who will remain significant throughout this entire trilogy. Some are well known: William T. Sherman, Albert Sidney Johnston, Nathan Bedford Forrest, Ulysses Grant, among a cast that will eventually include most of the major participants in the war that engulfs the South, from the Mississippi River to the Carolinas. Other characters you will not know at all. In the Civil War trilogy begun by my father with The Killer Angels, and through my own bookends to his classic work, Gods and Generals, and The Last Full Measure, the voices came from the top, the generals. As my own work spread out to include World Wars I and II, I realized that generals do not always tell the best story, and certainly not the whole story. For that reason, this series will also focus on the points of view of those men we would now call grunts. The search for voices can be challenging and fun, and my choice of characters will be both obvious and questionable. I receive an enormous amount of email asking why some particular person is overlooked or ignored altogether. I certainly mean no disrespect to anyone who played a pivotal role in any of these extraordinary chapters of our history, but my goal is not to offer a complete, detailed history of the event. If that's what you seek, then by all means read Shelby Foote or Jim McPherson. This book has to be described as a novel because there is dialogue, and you are often inside the thoughts of these characters. But I recognize and accept the risk that you might not agree with my interpretations. That's as it should be. My research is painstaking and voluminous, and I rely exclusively on original sources. In other words, the accounts of the people who were there. I make a strenuous effort to be historically accurate, to get the facts straight. I hope that when all is said and done, you will accept that what I am trying to offer you is a good story. Whether or not you are familiar with this history, I hope you will come to appreciate the diverse cast, whose points of view will carry you through one of the most important, dramatic, and horrific chapters of the Civil War: the Battle of Shiloh. Jeff Shaara, April 2012. Introduction. In April 1861, the American Civil War erupts with the firing of artillery by rebellious officials from the city of Charleston, South Carolina, toward the federal military installation called Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor. For decades, the disagreements and animosity between northern and southern states has been escalating. But when the cannons fire, those disagreements are replaced by mortal combat. The first significant bloodshed occurs closest to the boundary lines separating North and South. In the East, Virginia sides with the South, while Pennsylvania goes north. Between them, Maryland remains steadfastly neutral. West of the Appalachians, the same situation becomes much more hotly contested. Between the southern state of Tennessee and those states north of the Ohio River lies the large state of Kentucky. Much more so than Maryland, the political forces within Kentucky are angrily divided. The state legislature splits, and two separate state governments are formed, led by two governors. That competition divides the entire state, including the military. Regiments are formed that choose to fight for the North, while others go south. As the two sides grasp the enormity of what this war might involve, the territories west of the mountains face logistical difficulties that do not apply in the east. One is the control of the enormously important Mississippi River. Small-scale battles break out in those areas crucial to both sides. Key junctions and small shipping centers increasing tensions in supposedly neutral Kentucky. Throughout 1861, the events in the East, including the first major confrontation in Virginia, the Battle of Bull Run, are of little strategic significance to the armies struggling for control of the Mississippi River. North of the Kentucky-Tennessee border, the two armies maneuver and feel their way toward each other. Uncertain generals and untested troops moving toward a conflict the magnitude of which none can truly predict. In the North, there are immediate concerns for protection of the river cities, including Cairo, Illinois, and Louisville, Kentucky. But the newly formed Southern Army, under the command of Albert Sidney Johnston, pushes northward, very much aware that establishing positions in such towns as Columbus, Bowling Green, and Mill Springs, Kentucky, will provide a protective shield for the southern states under his command, and will most certainly force a response from his federal counterparts. Though Johnston's army continues to grow, fed by regiments from the states to the south, in Kentucky there is as much outrage at the presence of the invading Southern troops as there is support for the Southern cause. The Federal Army is slow to mobilize, but they do not suffer the difficulties the Southerners face in equipping and supplying a fledgling army. The result is a somewhat clumsy standoff, as each side seeks to organize and train for the conflict that must certainly come. Adding to Johnston's woes, what has happened in western Virginia also occurs in eastern Tennessee. There, sizable numbers of the population place their sympathies with the Union. There is little hope that the Southern cause will receive any support from the mountain regions, thus eliminating any convenient link with the Confederate forces east of the mountains. The Civil War becomes a war of separate theaters, divided by both rivers and mountains, linked together only by railroads. It is one more reason the Southern Army cannot hope to hold off a strong federal force that is organizing to drive them out of Kentucky. Close to the Tennessee-Kentucky border, the Southern forces create an anchor that they hope will prevent the far superior Federal Navy from driving straight into the heart of the Western Confederacy, which could split Johnston's Kentucky defenses in two. Two forts are constructed at the mouth of each of the two major rivers that flow northward out of Tennessee, the Tennessee and the Cumberland. It is a geographical coincidence that at a point just south of the Kentucky line the two rivers curve toward each other, the gap between them no more than 20 miles. To Southern engineers, it is a logical place to build the forts, since either one can support the other, with either supplies or men. The two forts are named Henry and Donelson, and great care is taken to design them primarily to defend against Federal gunboats. But Fort Henry on the Tennessee River, and not yet completed, is constructed on low ground, prone to flooding, and offers no real barrier to an assault. On February 6, 1862, the fort is attacked. Federal General Ulysses Grant, with a force of 15,000 men, aided by a flotilla of gunboats commanded by Flag Officer Andrew Foote, confronts a Confederate defense that consists of 17 guns, all of which are inferior to the heavy cannon on Foote's ironclad boats. After a brutally effective bombardment, the Confederate commander, Lloyd Tileman,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?